Hi, welcome to another meeting of iChime. In this meeting, I was able to sit down with two luminaries of the IBMi community, two people who have educated literally thousands of people throughout the years, two people who have really raised the talent level of the IBMi community as a whole. I'm talking about none other than Susan Gantner and Jon Paris. In this meeting, we were able to talk about a lot of different topics. Some of them included their backgrounds, their view on the IBMi community as it sits today, and offered some really good, interesting, sage advice on where you fit into this community and your career in general. So it doesn't matter if you're a newbie, a mid-career, or somebody who is approaching retirement, they really had advice to everybody on that. This was a very good meeting, very engaging, I thought, and I'm very grateful to both Susan and Jon for their time. So sit back, listen in, and enjoy the meeting. See you soon, everybody. Bye now. This goes back a ways, but I think some of the things in here are still quite relevant. This is an IBM Red Book, of course. Who knew you could do that with RPG4, modern RPG? So what are your thoughts on this, Susan and Jon? I mean, things in here are still very relevant?
Quite a lot of it is, yeah. Probably not some of the tools and stuff like that, but not the most modern stuff, obviously, given the timing of when it was done. But
Still the best.
yeah, there's still some things that we reference to people from time to time. When they're looking for examples of something, we say, well, it's an example of it, a little old, but we've got an example.
The only way to get that version, by the way, is through the SID website, through the System Developer website, because when IBM did the second coming of this particular book, which we also participated in, but late in the day, they decided to drop a bunch of pages of sections from the first book. But they'd committed that they had to keep the same, not ISBN, but the same book number.
Right.
And so as soon as the new version was published, this one went away, including a bunch of very low-level stuff that was, I thought, useful. So we host a copy of that.
So well, I know it was a big bestseller in its day, right? A bestseller, as it were. Yeah. So anyway, that's really great. So moving on, and we get into more modern times, and we have, of course, now we have the summit. More recently, Lunch and Learn, but the RPG DB2 Summit has been in existence for many, many, many years, and I know you've educated hundreds and hundreds of developers out there through the years. More recently, as a screen, this is from the most recent one, which just occurred, I think, just within the last month or so, 2 months, definitely for sure. Yeah. A Lunch and Learn, and there, of course, is the photo let's say, of Jon and Susan, but also with Patrick, Simon, and Mike, who have now, I guess, joined the summit team, I would say, right?
Yep,
indeed.
Sure.
So, yeah.
I've actually noticed spam.
Yes.
Yeah, and I know Patrick is in this very meeting. We just saw him. I don't know where he went, but he turned his camera off. But Patrick is joining us live today, which is great. Yeah. And we'll talk about this. I just wanted to. This is part of the introduction. We'll talk about this a little more in length. And finally, this website, authory.com, Jon Paris, Susan Gantner have authored hundreds, and I don't exaggerate. I think it's more than 700, hundreds and hundreds of articles throughout the years. And on every topic, as you can see here, they have contents on tooling, history of RPG, RPG4, RPG arrays, things like that. But the list goes on. And I know I personally, as a developer, have benefited from many, many of the articles, the examples that you've always given. And, it's really hard for me to, it's hard for me to put a definition of either one of you into a small box, because you really have truly done so much. And I really, you really are, in my eyes, but I think to many, many, and probably everybody in this meeting, luminaries of our community. There are a few people who really have reached the pinnacle of the community, and I think both of you well deserve that title. So I just wanted to put that out there too. It's really amazing how much you've done, how much you've contributed, and made the IBMi community a much better place for all of us. With that being the case, let's do a formal introduction so we can really just move forward with our meeting. So starting with Susan. Susan has been a programmer, educator, and IBMi evangelist for more years than she likes to think about, which I think that's probably, is that true, Susan? More than you want to think about? Yeah. After working as a programmer for several years, Susan joined IBM and then worked both at Rochester and Toronto labs. She spent most of her career teaching and encouraging developers to modernize their coding techniques and development tools. She's most proud of her role in the System-wide Developer Consortium. While she also enjoys Summit Lunch and Learn, she still sheds a tear when fondly remembering the pre-COVID RPG and DB2 Summit events. And I think we all shed a tear in that regard, right? That was those were a bit of the heydays, I suppose, the go-go days of yeah. John Paris has been earning his living, air quotes, playing with computers for over 56 years. Wow, that's pretty amazing. And that's part of the today's discussion. 56 years, I can't imagine. I thought I was doing it for a long time. But anyway, his mom thinks he should have retired a long time ago, but he's still not quite made the jump. He is practicing retirement, though. John is best known in the IBMi community for his work in the educational field with the Education Consortium System-wide Developer, hosted RPG and DB2 Summit events, and still hosts the Summit Lunch and Learn series. Right. John has worked at IBM's Toronto labs in the 1980s and 90s and is one of the fathers of RPG4. Wow. Now that we have that, so today's meeting, we came up with a title of A Look Back and Into the Future. How do you, I mean, let me just start from the very end and we'll work backwards. How do you even begin to look back? You know, there surely over all these years, there had to be, do you look back at your career as just one long continuous thing, or there must be certain moments in time that really stick with you even now? Like there are certain defining moments. What have been some of those defining moments that you have seen in all the years you've been doing this, you know, in the community or things like that?
You know, there's the defining moment of finally giving up on the idea that I was going to be a sociology person and listening to my dad, who had always told me to take a few programming courses. So I started computer programming and, you know, did that for several years, just developing applications for various companies. Eventually joined IBM. So that was my next sort of defining moment, I think. You know, I really enjoyed being a programmer, but I found that I loved working with programmers even more once I joined IBM. So systems engineer, and then moved up to Rochester and did a lot of work with some brilliant people in Rochester in those days. This was before IBMi, even before AS400, I suppose, initially. And so that was probably one of my early defining times, is with this community, with the platform, is going around the country, or around the world really, teaching the yet to be AS400 to IBMers.
Susan, you mentioned your father. I mean, he had a strong influence on you getting into IT, you said. Was he also into computers?
Yeah, he was an IBMer, and lifelong IBMer, and he, like I said, he kept bugging me all the time. He didn't really bug me to actually major in computer science. There was hardly any majors in computer science back then, I guess. But you know, he said, they got programming classes, you should learn.
I know you've had such great influence on so many people around the world, but what influence has speaking around the world had on both of you? Has it had it? I mean, it has to have had some kind of impact.
Yeah, I don't know that I can think of anything specific about the international nature of our history here. it was always good to find out what the culture was like. Even though we didn't get to see a lot of the sites, a lot of times we got to meet people. And that was what we enjoyed most.
I concur about that. So, I mentioned earlier, over 700 articles, some big number, and also speaking at events worldwide. And I've certainly I've seen you present in many, many places, including around the world. But what do you think might motivates you to share all that knowledge? I mean, it's something. I know you mentioned maybe your dad, perhaps, or maybe. But what might, can you point to one thing? Wow, this is so good, I want to share it. I mean, what was there one thing that was there one motivating factor that really made you decide to get into this space as an educator?
Well, I think for me, it was not so much that I thought I could, that I was so good at it or anything. Matter of fact, I didn't think that at all, although my dad was a good teacher. But it was the fact that I felt as having been a programmer for a long time before I joined IBM and was trying to convince other people to do things in certain ways. I mean, so they're trying to bring people, cajole people into, moving forward with their way they're coding, the tools they're using, and stuff like that. I honestly felt like, when I've learned this stuff, and the best way to learn something, by the way, is to teach it. At least that's always true for me. If I really need to learn something, I would often say, well, okay, I'll put that into my presentation stuff so that I'll teach it to a few people and figure out for myself exactly what it's like.
Let's talk about the groups, because I know that's really been a big part of your history. Talk about user groups in general and how that's evolved over the years. I mean, we all know that COVID just brought a hard stop to it, but even before COVID, I think user groups maybe struggle to stay relevant. And obviously today, in today's, this current year, there are still some that are strong, or maybe even stronger than ever. But
Yeah.
how do you think some of the groups, how do they stay current? And what's your view of user groups? And, do we have enough? Do we not have enough? Do we have too many? Do we have too little? Things like that. I mean, we can talk about conferences. That's a different space. User groups. What are your thoughts on that?
We haven't got enough for sure. But
you could never have too many.
Yeah. But the problems that most of them run into the same problems, that not enough people prepared to stand up and help run the meetings. So we've known more user groups collapse because of lack of board members than because of lack of people who want to go to sessions. So the other thing I've noticed about the ones that succeed or seem to keep going, they don't forget nuts and bolts training. It's very, very easy to get dragged along by IBM and the latest, greatest, etc. But the RPG session introducing new array features, for example, that came out 2-3 years ago. Well, I wasn't at the meeting where that was taught and haven't picked it up since. So, I mean, I think it's not the better user groups aren't constantly out on the bleeding edge, I think. And that's one of the things we tried to learn with Summit, and we still do it with the
Lunch and learn
stuff.
Yeah.
You try to do some bleeding edge stuff, and you try to bring it back and repeat the foundational stuff, shall we say.
Without user groups and some of the larger conferences, these are the last bastion, if you will, for teaching RPG. I know there are some colleges that do it, but by and large, there's not a lot of colleges doing it, of course. And this is always a tricky argument to have, because I'm a huge proponent of the idea that you don't need formal education RPG per se, or any language really. If you're a developer, you can pick up the skills. but there is still the other side of that argument that says, well, without formal education, it's you're going to lose the language or the ability to maintain the language. What are your thoughts on that?
Well,
do you mean about not teaching it in colleges? And
Right,
stuff?
not having a formal curriculum on RPG.
I mean, I think it would be good to have more RPG taught in colleges, but to be honest, I'm not convinced it's absolutely necessary these days anyway. Because there's so many other ways to learn things other than that. We often get requests from people, saying, well, how do we actually learn this language? Or how do we teach it to our new people who come in and all of that? And that's an answer that we don't really have a good global solution to. There are some things. There's the Jim Buck's company that teaches RPG online, for example. Is that they do a good job and apparently have been very successful at turning out a lot of really good RPGers. We talk to a lot of them when we go to conferences and user groups and things like that. So, and they're not the only ones, I'm sure, that do that. But so, I just, yeah, I think user groups are important, even if they're not face to face. I love the face to face stuff, and I think that's ideal to do that as much as possible. But it's just not feasible for everybody over the long term, I think, a lot of times. The Toronto user group does a good thing. To me, it's a good thing. I think that like every other meeting is a live one and the others are on Zoom. And so they still get a chance to get together. They also do a good thing because it's a pretty big city where they switch locations, one side of the city one time, another side of the city the next time. So you don't necessarily see the same group whenever you go to a meeting.
That's true.
So there are those kind of things to keep in mind. But yeah, I don't know that not having formal education is all that important. I think having education is important, though.
I haven't had formal education.
I was going to say, here's a good example. Well, I didn't have any formal education for RPG. No, I learned COBOL and reformed.
Yes, you learned RPG just pure osmosis, I guess.
No, I did take an IBM course, I suppose. And the IBM course that I took was for the first one I ever took. Because I kind of, I was going to say cheated a little bit. I lied a tiny bit. Didn't really lie. I exaggerated slightly. My background in RPG when I joined IBM. When they interviewed me, I said, yeah. Oh, yeah, I know a little bit about RPG. And then I went back home to my dad and said, okay, I got to learn RPG.
Right, exactly.
So that helped a lot. But the very first actual course I took was an IBM course, and it was for a version of RPG that didn't exist for very long at all, the one that worked on 5280s, called Data Entry RPG. And as a COBOL programmer, I thought, this is the easiest language in the world, And all the RPG programmers who went to learn that particular version of RPG couldn't do it. They all struggled. And it was because there was no cycle. They were all into cycle coding, and that was the one part of RPG that I kept, when I tried to learn it from books and even from my dad and stuff, going, no, don't get it. Sorry. That's what I found the hardest about RPG. I'm glad I don't have to worry about that anymore.
No mean. John, I know you wrote an article years and years ago. It sounds like your position has somewhat softened or has softened, but I remember we talked about this a long time ago. You were talking about the whites of their eyes, how important that was to you, seeing the whites of their eyes, but obviously Lunch and Learn obviously has proven that the Zoom model or the video online model can be sustainable and work. But talk about that for a minute. What was like? I know when Zoom first came out or when online training first came out, I know you were somewhat against it. You wrote an article about the whites of their eyes, if I remember correctly.
For me, it is a difference that I can do a 20-minute lunch and learn session, something like that. But I would find it really hard to teach full classes these days. And that comes back to losing the interpersonal contact. And asking people to turn their screens on is no good either, because half the time all it demonstrates to you is that they're chasing their cat around the room.
Or doing their email.
Or doing their email, or doing anything.
It is they're doing on their computer other than
doing anything but listening to
watching
you,
us what we're doing.
So the I still I understand the necessity, desirability, etc. of using online for education, but I still believe it is next to impossible for it to achieve what you can achieve in person. It's just not. What happens is, I think, for example, if I'm doing a session over Zoom, I dumb it down to the level of the lowest audience I've ever interacted with personally. Because I mean, that the normal thing is to, as you know, Charlie, you're watching the students, you're seeing what they're understanding or what's going past them, etc., and you adjust. You bring down the level, you hit the points until you can adjust and get where you're going. You can't do that like this, right? You just can't see this where the students are at sufficiently. And so for me, this is always going to be second best.
How about the demographics of students? Do you see, one thing that I'm encouraged by, and I say this a lot, because I think it's been more recently, I've seen a lot more of this. And what I'm talking about is newbies to the platform, or younger people coming into the fold here. And I'm delighted to see it. Either I've been missing it or just wasn't looking properly, but there seemed to be, and maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe that's why they look younger to me. But I seem to be seeing more younger people on the platform these days. Yeah. Do you agree with that, or is it just my perception?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think one of the earliest circumstances where we had that was when we went to teach in North Carolina. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the company, a longtime RPG shop, but like a lot of RPG shops, this was several years, it was probably 15 years ago, probably. So, maybe they were just a little earlier than some of the others, where a lot of their older RPGers had moved on, retired, and, left. And so they were, they sort of had to desperately hire whoever they could, and they could only find Java programmers. And so they had written a little bit of Java, because that's what they knew, and they didn't know RPG. So they called us in to say, can you come teach these guys RPG so that, they can work on our code that's already existing rather than them having to write around the edges of it with Java.
Yeah, but the RPG you were teaching them was not, it was current. Obviously, it was current.
Absolutely.
RPG.
And that is the thing, is that so many people saying, we're going to have to move off the platform, or we're going to have to move off RPG because, nobody wants to learn this language. And, well, they don't want to learn the old RPG. No, they want to learn a modern RPG that is pretty much synonymous with all the other languages that they are familiar with, except in many cases, a lot easier. I mean, for the tasks that it's good at, right? It's not the best for everything, but for the things that it's good at, and it's an awful lot of business background stuff, that you can't do better.
So that obviously brings us up to the next big step in the progression of tools, and that's AI. I know we spoke a while back, and you mentioned, Susan, that I know, John, you mentioned that you're a much bigger consumer, I guess, of AI, at least as of right now. I think that Susan is. I think that's what you had said to me.
I use it more for coding. Susan uses it more when she gets frustrated with trying to come up with an abstract or a sentence for a letter.
I tell you, I have I have just recently, fairly recently, kind of come into the idea of using it for just a lot of writing. I mean, just all my writing and stuff. I mean, not just regular emails, although I've done it for a couple of emails from time to time. But just how to say things in an effective way, I guess.
If you were advising somebody right out of high school about to enter college and picking a major, for example, what should a course of study? What should I pick? Would you still today, even with the advent of AI, strongly as it is, would you still encourage them to go into IT or into programming particularly, or just IT in general? Is it you still, or have we reached a point where with AI that it's may not be as good of a field as it was even as recently as 5-10 years ago? What are your thoughts?
I'd still say it was a worthwhile career path.
Good endeavor.
Yeah, I mean, but the winners in this next go round are going to be the ones who make AI work for them. The losers are going to be the people who make the assumption that because it was done by AI, therefore it must be right. And
Or good enough.
Or good enough. And don't actually really test it out. When I first started using the Watson, we part of the Watson program. When I first started using it, it was interesting and watching it learn as it was corrected. When I got hold of Project Bob, it's a very different animal. And what was interesting still though was that I'm sitting back being absolutely flabbergasted by the fantastic job that this thing has done. It's drawn up the design documents, it's filled in all the gaps, it's done everything, generated the entire set of code. And then when you throw it at the compiler, you realize that apart from any number of other not immediately obvious errors, it's actually used reserved RPG names for variable names within the program. And so I think, okay, well, it's got a way to go yet. You're not. It's not just a Betty Crocker cake mix. You know what I mean? You throw the egg and the milk in and whip it up, and it's wonderful. You've really got to watch what you're doing with it. It's got huge potential, but whether people will be patient enough for that potential to come through properly before it gets a bad rep for all the nasty things it's going to do, that's a different issue.
But it's not going away. You did mention the winners are going to be those who embrace AI. I think I concur with you on that. Absolutely. I think at this point in time, if you were getting into IT today, it's here to stay. The genie's out of the bottle. You can't ignore it for sure.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
I think we agree on that.
And you can use it not only to generate code, but for all those jobs that none of us ever really like to do, like document them, the code that's there. Some of those kind of things, which makes it easier for you, going back in later. I mean, how many times did I look at the code and going, did I write this? I mean, it's got my name on it, but I don't really remember anything about this. What did I have in mind? But getting things documented, and making things easier for developers. I mean, like you said, it's a tool. It's not a replacement. It's just another tool.
One thing that always fascinates me are the people in our industry, the ones who've really seen it, from through many decades. And is there anybody, maybe with or without naming names, or any people who you've seen that really embodies the whole legacy of IBMi, if you will? I mean, I know you've worked with Paul, of course, but is there anybody else that comes to your mind, or any one type of person who comes to your mind who you could say, that's the person who people should really be looking at and saying, that's somebody you want to emulate, maybe without even saying a name, a type of person perhaps, or a personality type even. What makes somebody successful I guess in our community today?
I don't think there is. I don't think there is any such thing, Charlie. It's so much of a combination. It's time and place, and I mean, so you see stuff like Simon Hutchinson's blog that he's been putting out for years now.
Yeah.
When he first put out the first one or two of those, I think if you told him that he was going to be the next sort of rising star in the RPG and SQL world, and that people would be asking for his autograph when he appeared at a conference, sort of thing, he'd have told you were going completely crazy. You know, it just, it's have people who are at the right time, at the right place at the right time. I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of it, but I firmly believe that there was a point when we were pushing through RPG4 through IBM, where the thing that allowed us to succeed was the fact that I'd already had a career before I went to IBM. And if I annoyed enough people and they wanted me fired, that was fine. And so when you get to a point with certain products where you've just got a hill to get over, and your budgets are being threatened and various other things, it's being, somebody who's there at the right time, and who in my case didn't care if he got fired.
To me, there's a lot of things that make this platform unique, different from anything else out there, and always will. I'm convinced of that. And I'm convinced that it's something that is very hard to define, and IBM still hadn't figured it out. What a gold mine it is. Unfortunately, they didn't take advantage of it. I think as much as they should, but that's another story. I think that the people that really like this platform, have worked on this platform, most of the people who hang around for a while do so because they like it, and they recognize the value of the platform, the language, the whole sort of ethos of the thing, and also have sort of developed this community atmosphere.
What other nuggets are there maybe for somebody who's mid-career or approaching retirement, or not even approaching, just older in the community, but not necessarily retiring next year, things like that? What advice perhaps or observations can you make and instill upon us? I include myself in that group, by the way.
People will say, oh, this is good enough. This is the way I've done it. Yeah, I'm not necessarily saying you need to learn stuff, completely new stuff, radically new, and completely redo everything. On the other hand, if you're proud of the career that you've had and the application work that you've done, you also don't, I really think it would be a shame. I would hate to think that when I do walk out the door, my application dies because people can't figure it out, because it's so old and creaky that they can't maintain it. You want to continue to modernize stuff, or at least, maybe bring in some of the AI stuff to help document it, if nothing else, and so that it doesn't die. I mean, we really don't want to lose all the business experience and stuff that from these people that have retired, because they left code that was unmaintainable and or undocumented, that kind of thing. So, think about what the future of your code is, as well as the future of yourself when you're retiring.
So let's kind of start, wrapping this up. Well, let's wrap this up, I should say. What's your, if there was like one last message, you were standing on the top of the roof, in the rooftops with a megaphone, what would be the final message you have for, anybody in the community? I mean, I'm just curious. I mean, I don't know, just like one like some sage advice.
I just had a good one pop into my head, which I'll don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure.
Yeah. I've seen too many shops do that. And sometimes in the name of modernization, they're not modernizing, they're replacing basically, effectively. But yeah, and also just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean it's better.
Yeah.
Just because
I like that.
just because it's been running for 20 years doesn't mean it's
Best.
good either. I mean, it's the best way to do something. So you just continue to make yourself better. I mean, we talked about learning, continue to learn. And what you do with that as a developer is continue to make your code and your apps better. Whether that means, throwing in other languages to do different things that RPG isn't as good at, or, learning new tools, getting AI involved for, making things easier, or doing the documentation and the stuff you don't like to do. Those, yeah, just continue to move forward with what you're doing. As soon as you sort of sit there and decide, yeah, this is it. I've learned all I need to learn. I've done all I need to do. I'll just turn the crank for another few years before I retire. Yeah, maybe you should have retired before. Watch out for your legacy, right?
Sounds like good advice. For sure. All right. Hey, Susan, John, what can I say? This has been great. It's been fun, I think. Talking about some of the old, the good old days, so it were, but really looking forward as well. And that's really where where we're going. Just keep moving forward. People are putting some comments in the chat here. Thanks for the meeting. Thank you very much. Another great meeting. Thank you, John and Susan. Very interesting. So these are all things that are in the chat there. So people really enjoyed it. I want to just thank you very much for doing this, and I wish you another 100 years in IT.
I go for that. We're having a real struggle. We're figuring out how we're going to retire, because we're enjoying it too much.
I know. Well, no one's forcing you to.
Yeah, true.
In the end, from me to you, on behalf of everybody here and everybody I know who I mentioned your name, thank you for everything you've done. Truly, thank you for everything you've done and will continue to do for us going forward. We're all in your debt, I feel. So thank you.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thanks for keeping the community going.
Well, we're trying. Many hands make a what's the word? Lighten the load. I can't think of the actual expression, but you understand, right?
Yep.
I see a lot of hands waving here. That's good. That's great. All right. We'll keep in touch, and looking forward to seeing you again, of course. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and Happy New Year.
Happy
New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year, for sure. All right. Bye-bye, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.